Okay, hey guys. So ये मेरा पहली बार है live. So I'm also not sure how this works, how the software works, but let's begin. So this is a new format for how I may do a few videos in future. And if you've seen my work, you've seen that I go deep into the core of some ancient Vedic science topics, as well as have made some videos on astrology in the past. And today I want to you know touch a topic that I have been writing about from last 8 to 10 years. And this topic is about a new lens or a new way of seeing the universe or the reality around us. uh, so over millennia, different kinds of thinkers and researchers have they've had these uh, mathematical rules or maps they've built to understand the universe around them, to make sense of it. And in Vedic science, this is usually known as Sankhya Vidya or Sankhya Yoga. And yoga definition is altogether a full video. But Sankhya Yoga is basically using numbers or symbols or words to uh, understand the universe, the reality, and the ultimate truth. And there are limitations to it, and there are advantages to it. So any mathematical system or any uh, you know book of physics is kind of Sankhya Yoga. And the way to see reality around us, these days, has been mostly the math and physics of the modern day world. But this way or this method of looking at reality has not always been, and it is a common bias for us to kind of reject the ancient or other lenses or other ways of looking at things, uh, with the bias that our way or our map makes sense and the other maps don't make sense, because we don't have a foundation on why those maps are being used. So I'll delve into those topics, but in the meanwhile, I would. I'm just also in parallel checking out how this live system works. Okay, this allows me to share my screen. That's excellent, because I want to talk about an article that I had written some time ago. And yeah, so great. I can share the article and talk about it. So let's go into this. As I was saying, there are many ways to see the same reality. The Vedic seers, Vedic sages, when they're composed or realized, I would say realized the Vedas, and Veda literally means knowledge. When they realized knowledge, it was preserved uh, in the form of sounds that humans can understand, and it was scribed. And the Vedas uh, were preserved, uh, and they had a unique lens of seeing things. Like uh, for example, in a Vedic shloka, you would see the word Indra a lot, and I made a video on Indra very recently. Now, what is Indra? Indra is when two locations within this universe have a very huge high potential difference. And that potential could be anything. It could be charge, it could be a gravitational potential difference, it could be just water behind a dam or in the clouds. It could be any kind of thing where pressure is building up on one between two places, and is not getting released or discharged. When that pressure suddenly breaks off and discharges, that principle or that phenomenon is called Indra. And I made a whole video on that. And we today see Indra as just the thunder god or the god of rain. But if you read the Vedas, and if you read the etymology, which is the science of understanding how a word originated, and if you know how Sanskrit works, you will know that in reality, the sages were trying to describe this particular principle. So I won't go into that thing, but this is also one of the lenses to see how things behave when there's a pressure build up in a situation. So it usually explodes, right? And that's where the the thunder lightning kind of association with Indra comes in. So this was one way the sages described the same principle. While today in physics or mathematics or modern day science, we describe it as potential difference or sudden discharge of potential. That's the way how we talk about the same thing. So the point here is that the same reality, the same universe around us could be seen from various angles and lenses, could be described in various ways. uh, you just need the foundation to understand what is the lens or perspective this particular uh, entity is trying to use. And one of those lenses is what I have developed, uh, not developed but realized in a way, uh, that I want to talk about in this video. And I know I didn't even start about the lens or the topic, and took around 6.5 minutes, but this background had to be built up. And the topic that I would like to talk about is I have written some axioms. Now, the word axiom means a basic foundational truth on top of which you can build more, deductions or derivations. For example, two parallel lines never cross each other is a mathematical axiom. From that, on top of it, you can make more rules because you accept this as a fundamental truth, and then you can build on top of it. So these are kind of some axioms or observations that I wanted to talk about, and I believe that these axioms are at the core or at the deepest foundation of the origin of astrology also. uh, so I always used to wonder that there is Vedic astrology, there is this Western astrology, there is Chinese astrology, there's tarot card reading, there's numerology, there's face reading, there's palm reading, there's Nadi astrology with the thumb, there's the Nadi astrology by a gentleman named Mr. Umang Taneja. And there are many forms of astrology. Uh, and I have observed that all of them are potent and all of them are able to come to similar conclusions, or they have predictive power. So how can this be that it's not like one is wrong or one is right? How can it be that all these seemingly different approaches, or totally contradictory, not contradictory, but totally different ways of seeing, things, are able to predict similar kind of outcomes, or are kind of valid? So there must be some underlying mechanism or some underlying truth that we are missing out, uh, that makes all of these work. So this is kind of the most critical part of this video, like why all forms of astrology do work. What is the underlying foundational principle that is true, and hence all forms of astrology can work? I mean, if tomorrow, for some reason, all the planets vanished, that would not make astrology vanish. Like, we can still use the hand, or face reading, or forehead reading. And if somebody does not have their hands because of some mishappening, that does not mean astrology does not apply, right? uh, Contrary to some things people say. So astrology is the science and art, and this is a definition that I have made up. Astrology is the science and art of looking at events in one seemingly unrelated sequence, and being able to understand or predict what would happen in some other seemingly unrelated sequence. Now, what do you mean by sequence? And that's the topic of this video as well. From a high level, sequence is like, for example, a sequence of planets moving across the elliptic from Aries to Pisces. That's a sequence of events happening. And another sequence is maybe a tree growing from a seed to a full blown tree and then withering away. Another sequence could be, you know somebody uh, built a large palace. It kept standing for thousands of years and then it withered away. Our life is a sequence from birth to death, or transformation. So the definition I gave is that astrology is the science and art of uh, looking at events in one particular sequence and then kind of figuring out what could be happening or would happen in some other seemingly unrelated sequence. And I use the word seemingly because it may look like those sequences are unrelated, but maybe they're not. So this is a high level idea of the word sequence. And so coming back to the main point of the video is that uh, I started with that there are, in this universe, there are many lenses or many perspectives to see the same reality. And I talked about the current uh, modern day physics and mathematics perspective, the perspective of Vedic sages, and the perspective, a new lens that I have been using a lot. And I want to talk about that perspective of seeing the reality around us or the universe around us holistically. So that perspective is consists of 7 laws or 7 points that I have written over here in my blog. And I would make videos only on the first 5 because honestly I'm also a little explorative and still discovering the sixth and seventh one properly and just trying to understand it. So the first one is called the law of the sequences. And let me start with the definition and then the explanation. So, what I mean by the law of sequence is that every entity and event within space time. Now, space time is the word I use for universe because it consists of space and time. Uh, the whole universe, like, could be me sitting here in this room, the city, the planet, the solar system, the galaxy, as far as you can go. Anything within the universe, within the observable universe. Every entity or every event. Now, entity is kind of like this, maybe this cup of tea. This is an entity. And event could be anything. Like I picked it up and I placed it back there. That's an event. Okay. So let's use that example now. So every entity or event within space time is a sequence. Okay, everything is a sequence. Each sequence is made up of contributing subsequences and is part of a larger super sequence. So, kind of a self explanatory definition. So, for example, I picked up this cup, showed it to you, placed it back there. Now, this is a sequence of events. And this sequence is made up of subsequences. For example, one sequence is my hand going till the cup, second is me picking it up, third is me bringing it here, uh, you know placing it back, bringing my hand back here. So I can call them 5 subsequences. Now I can split these sequences further as well, just raising the hand. You can go in till infinite depth into splitting. So it is made up of subsequences and is part of a larger sequence. Now, this video is the larger sequence, maybe here, and this cup example is a part of it, right? So every entity or event in this universe, you think of anything, you think of your birth to death life, you going to office and coming back, you the journey of a photon of light from sun to planet earth, to a tree, to an animal, to you know radiating back into space. Anything you want to imagine, the journey of a planet from Aries to Pisces, from one nakshatra to another. Anything that you can imagine in your head is a sequence, and it can be split up into any number of subsequences and is a part of a larger super sequence. So I would like you to think of example as many examples as you can, but that's the first law in this framework or lens that I use to observe reality. Sometimes, not always. Like, this is one of the frameworks that I realized and wrote down, but I'm not like every day thinking on the street that this is sequence and everything when I see a car passing by, but you know for the educational purposes. Uh, so as I said, I have this framework or a lens to see reality, and it has 7 points. And the first point of that lens is that, uh, and I made this framework to be able to come to the conclusion about why all forms of astrology work, and how these could be the fundamental axioms from which further development, deduction, or derivations could be developed, or a new scientific method could come up. So the first law or rule or observation of that lens or framework is that everything is a sequence. Now, I'll delve a bit into sequences in this episode only because I don't want the video to be very long, but there are 7 of these. So let's begin. So, a sequence is a flow of events with an initiation, progression, or sustenance, and a transformation or culmination phase. That's, I think we kind of talked about it. So, I use an example of a photon in my article. Like a photon emerging from the core of the sun kind of starts its journey from the surface of the sun. Now, this photon maybe started in the core of the sun, center of the sun, but let's take a starting point. Like, uh, for the case of our example, it starts from the surface of the sun, progresses through space time, and then reaches Earth. Maybe touches a leaf, and on the leaf it transforms from light or electromagnetic energy into chemical energy inside the leaf. So photosynthesis occurs. The leaf converts that photon into chlorophyll, a chemical. So energy in the form of photon started in the sun, initiates its journey, sustains through space, touches a leaf. You can call it a culmination or a transformation, but now this energy is no longer a photon. Now this energy is a chlorophyll molecule, which an animal can eat, right? Animals can't eat photons or light directly, right? So now this energy has transformed into chemical energy inside the leaf, which initiates a new sequence from here. Now this tree or this leaf can be eaten by an animal or a human being. It gets digested. The same photon, the same energy gets transformed into that animal's cells or proteins or other molecules. And then when that organism dies, it can be turned into fire or some other animal or some bacteria and itself. But the example here is trying to show that the same photon, the same energy is going through so many sequences. Every sequence is having an initiation, sustenance, and culmination phase, and it just goes on. So, and each of these sequences again can be split up into subsequences, and each of these sequences, like first sequence from sun to the leaf, second from leaf to the animal, third from animal to maybe a carnivore, and then from carnivore to bacteria, or maybe finally in some other form just going back into space, is is this is also kind of a super sequence. Now in that super sequence, these are kind of subsequences. So I hope you get the idea. So this is the first fundamental principle that I think is the root one of the roots on why astrology works, and we'll come to that later because this is a deep topic. But try to think about this and try to let me know if you find these odd topics and these new ways of explaining things helpful. And do think of what sequences you can think of around you. Maybe you are going your whole day is following this rule, like you wake up till you sleep. This is the super sequence of the day. In there's a sequence when you're freshening up in the washroom. There's a sequence when you're getting ready. There's a sequence when you're you know going to the office, inside the office, coming back, other things. So everything is a sequence. It is made up of smaller subsequences and is part of a larger super sequence. Everything, every event, every entity. So I want you to just ponder or explore on this thought and let me know what you think in the comments, because then we will be, and if you like this format, we'll go to the next law, which is the law of systems. And this is also very interesting. But I want to just leave this video with this background that I wanted to build up, and the first law of these universal axioms. So I hope you liked it. Let's see the feedback. This is the first live experiment. Thank you.